All right, happy Sunday to everyone. Thank you so much for coming in to watch this video. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm exhausted today. I took a 2-hour basically walk with my dog this afternoon. Came home, did a bunch of stuff around the house, and obviously had a lot of time to think about things and see where things are going, because this weekend was obviously a little crazy for us with all of the BTC fees, right? The halving happening. Me going on Bryce and Anthony's channel to do a live stream with them, and then we did a full, what was it, like 7 hours of, no, it wasn't 7 hours, I think it was like 6 hours of Twitter Spaces on Saturday. So I didn't get a chance to do a video yesterday, so I wanted to get one out today. But a couple of things I want to talk to you guys obviously about is the impact that we're seeing here on the Bitcoin transaction fees. Are obviously, no one expected them to be this high. We did have obviously some sources saying, like Crypto Miami on Twitter, if you guys follow him or not, but he was saying for at least the last couple of weeks in the spaces that we hosted and other spaces that all of the stuff with the runes is going to have a big impact, right? But we didn't know how big of an impact it was actually going to have on Bitcoin transaction fees. And the fees have gone, I mean, the first 24 hours were crazy. They've come down a little bit here recently, which is nice to see, but they're still relatively high to where we thought Bitcoin rewards are going to be with the miners. So kind of want to look at that a little bit, see where Bitcoin is right now as well. And then we'll get into also the Bitcoin versus the Bitcoin miners this past week, see how they did. And then what can we expect as far as the miners going into this week going forward, since the Bitcoin transaction fees are much higher than we thought. Okay. So as always, you guys know the drill here. This is not financial advice for entertainment only. Please do your own research and invest in the following coins and companies for full disclosure. And if you enjoy this type of content, hit the like button, subscribe, helps me out tremendously. Also, corrections will be posted to Discord, YouTube, Twitter, and I'm not paid by any public Bitcoin mining company. Full disclosure there for you guys as well. Okay. So let's take a look at what's going on here with Bitcoin really quick, and then we'll get into the other things as well. So Bitcoin over the weekend has been actually kind of trading flat overall, which is actually a pretty good sign, I think, right? We really don't want any major moves over the weekend, especially with these Bitcoin futures on there, because we've seen in the past that, not always, but for the most part, when we have a gap between the futures and what's happening on Mondays, then is we will eventually come back to fill that gap. It's not always the case, but majority of the time it is. So I'm kind of happy to see that Bitcoin is actually kind of trading sideways here on the weekend. We were up a little bit on Saturday, right? We were up 1.75% on Saturday. Sunday we finished up down a little bit here, down 0.02, so nothing major. And then we're down a little bit here again today. So we also have this spot Bitcoin ETFs happening in Hong Kong later on this month, right? So that's going to be a catalyst for us to potentially go up higher at that point. And based on this, and then what we're seeing as far as the network transaction fees right now, I think the miners are going to do pretty well tomorrow. But that's kind of my guess right now based on what I'm seeing here. And if we look at some information here that we can see here on this chart here, this is from CORZ Scientific, right? CORZ provided in the last 24 hours, this was earlier today, that they mined 57.3 Bitcoins in the last 24 hours. I mean, that's huge. That's a huge increase from where they were normally, right? Normally they're like in the 30s, somewhere around there. So having that many more Bitcoins being mined, not only for them, but I think Cleanspark was like at 40 something also this past 24 hours. So we're seeing the miners obviously benefiting quite tremendously from this, which I think is well, I know it's a good thing obviously for us and for the Bitcoin miners as well. But I think it's going to surprise a lot of investors based on this, because we were all expecting Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners to obviously get half the rewards, right? Half the revenue, but we're not seeing that right now. At least we're seeing a much better block rewards with the Bitcoin transaction fees being added to it. If we look at the block rewards here, and the block, this is the mempool space, right? If you look at it here, we can see here that the last block that was mined, they're getting 4.52 Bitcoins in total, right? The subsidy. So you get 3.125 in there, plus the transaction fees, which was 1.396 here. All right, my eyesight isn't that great when I'm looking at the screen here. So I have to look at the other one. But obviously that's a lot better than we were expecting. We were thinking that the fees would be maybe 10%, right? We were averaging about 5% over the last 2 months or so. So given the halving, they would be around 10%. But we're seeing that the fees are actually right now, at least currently, they're around like 30+ % increase over what the transaction or the block rewards are in addition to, right? So I think this is a good sign. This will obviously lead to the miners obviously making a little bit more than we thought they would, 33%, somewhere around there. So at this point, I think if the block rewards continue, and you have some block rewards that are like 3 points, you had total fees 3.264, so you got 6.38, right? Total Bitcoin subsidy and fees in there for the miners. This was via F2 pool. You got Brains pool. Prior to that was 1.39, right? And then you got prior to that 1.15. Additional fees 1.66. So I mean, we're seeing quite a large amount, 0.875. That was a little bit lower. But then you had 1 BTC here, you got 1 BTC here. So as long as we stay around like the 1 BTC or something like that, I think the miners will do pretty well going forward. It's not going to be as bad as we thought it's going to be, mainly because really what's going to be happening here is over time as the block rewards get halved again in the next, when is that going to be? Let's see if this pops up. If this pops up in the next 1,434 days, you can see it up there. That's going to be coming down to, what's it going to be, like 1.6 something BTC at that point, right, for the rewards for the miners. And over time, we need the Bitcoin transaction fees to be a major role in this. And we're seeing that kind of more so this halving cycle than we have in the past, mainly because we had block rewards that were much higher, right? We had 6.25, we were at 12.5, we had 25 at that point prior to that, and we had 50, obviously. So as the transaction or the block rewards get smaller, the transaction fees need to take a much bigger role in the miners' revenue side of things, along with that and with Bitcoin going up. Because you need kind of both. You need transaction fees going up and Bitcoin price going up at the same time as well, which I think we're obviously going to be seeing here in the next 12 to 18 months going forward. That's kind of what I'm expecting. This current week, I think the miners are probably going to do pretty well. I'm guessing they're going to be in the green on Monday, maybe Tuesday. We'll see how they work out because I think the fear of just a huge reduction in Bitcoin revenue, right, wasn't cut in half. It was actually really good for the first 24 hours or so. I mean, it was excellent. And then we're seeing this continued steady pace of Bitcoin transaction fees being added to it as well, which adds obviously to the revenue of the miners as well. And then Bitcoin going up in value over time will help things as well. But let me know what you guys think. We'll obviously get into the questions here shortly. But that's kind of my thinking on it, at least right now. And then also if we look at, let me see if I was back here. Yeah. If we look at the network transaction or network hash rate. If we look at this screen here, we can see the expectation was come halving, a lot of the miners would be coming down in value or coming down. Wow, I am tired. A lot of the miners would be shutting off machines after the halving because it would be not profitable, right? That's kind of the case that we were thinking of if Bitcoin was going to be around 40 to 45, 50,000, something like that. There would be probably a lot of miners that are like the 80, 90 terahash miners, even maybe the 70 terahash miners that are not going to be profitable. So there was the idea that the network hash rate is going to actually drop tremendously. This is on the 30-day scale here, so we can see that the network hash rate is at 617 exahash right now, which is our highest it has been, and it continues to go up. If you look at the daily here, it's still within our range. We're not dropping too far down, right? If we look at the 7-day average, we're down a little bit here, but we're still obviously peaked here. This was on Friday, 650 exahash was the high here, our latest high. On the 1 day, we can see that our previous highs were 710 exahash, we had 709, we had 708, so right around 700 is the kind of high here on the daily time frame, right? Because at certain times you have miners plugging or turning the miners on, and at sometimes they're turning them off depending on Bitcoin price, electricity costs, things like that. So you have all these obviously fluctuations throughout the day from one day to the next. But that's kind of what we're seeing here. So right now, I'm not seeing that there's a huge drop in the network transaction or network hash rate, sorry. Like we were thinking, right? We were thinking maybe 10 to 20% drop. We're not seeing that. I was thinking maybe a 5% drop, but with the additional network transaction fees being added into it, the miners are not in any kind of peril at all. They are going to be doing just fine, even if you have some of the older miners. And I think maybe this cycle, well, we know the cycle is already different in many ways, but this cycle, we may not have at all that drop in network hash rate, because if Bitcoin continues to go up, even if the network hash rate continues to go up, right, that's going to offset some of those losses there, which is kind of what we're seeing right now. So going forward, I'm not expecting a big drop in the network hash rate, which is a good sign, right? Because that way it's profitable for all the miners to be mining. But the side effect of that is, we had a lot of obviously miners looking for buying distressed assets. We're not going to see that this time around. So obviously companies like Cleanspark, potentially others as well, that are looking to buy distressed assets or buy facilities, things like that, they're not going to be that very distressed, at least not right now, the way that things are looking right now. If Bitcoin transaction fees actually go down, maybe at that point, but if Bitcoin continues to go up, that's still going to offset some of the things, right? So they're going to have to end up paying a little bit more potentially for the facilities that they want to buy, just based on the cycle that we're in right now, which is fine, right? They're making money, they're making a lot of money, and that can be obviously offset by the gains they're going to have in hash rate going forward. But that's kind of one of the things that I've also kind of noticed here with the recent updates that we're seeing from transaction fees, network hash rate, Bitcoin price as well. But we'll see how it all plays out going forward. Okay. So that is it on that. Let's get into the Bitcoin miners as far as how they did for the past week along against Bitcoin. And then as always, we look at this chart here, which is where the miners are from their 52-week lows and how far away they are from the 52-week highs. You can still see, obviously, Cleanspark here has outperformed everybody here. It's up 416% from its 52-week lows. Bitcoin is up 157%. And then you got TeraWolf up pretty much close to Bitcoin right now, 157 as well. You got Marathon up 130%. You got Cypher up 118, BitTier 117, Bitfarms 108, Iris 77, Hut 36%, BitDigital 23%, Core 18, Riot 17, and Hive only up 6%, right? So those guys are obviously underperforming where Bitcoin is right now, and that's kind of what we expected, especially as we get closer to the halving event. We're obviously past the halving event now, and it'll all depend on where Bitcoin price goes, where the transaction fees go, and things like that, and how well they are growing forward in hash rate. But that's kind of the way things are stacking up right now. And then how far away they are from the 52-week highs. We can see Bitcoin's pretty close to its 52-week high with only 13% away. Followed by next, probably closest one would be Cleanspark here. It's only 30% away from its 52-week high, which was obviously a couple of weeks ago, right? It was at $20-some, 23, 24. Cypher's also pretty close to that, 33%. And then who else do we have here that's pretty low? Lowest one would probably be TeraWolf, right? 43% as well on that one. So that's kind of the way things are stacking up there. Looking at the weekly numbers here on the miners as far as what they did against Bitcoin here. Bitcoin was down 5% last week. The only ones that did a little bit better than them was Hut 8. That was only down 3%. Iris was only down 2% on that. And then TeraWolf down 7, Core down 9, Hive down 11, Cleanspark down 12, BitTier down 16, 17 for Bitfarms, Cypher down 17 along with BitDigital, Riot was down 20, and Marathon was down 21. Right. And then if we look at the 4 weeks chart, things look a little bit different here. Now we got Cypher being up 24%, TeraWolf being up 12%, Bitcoin being down 9%. So we have a couple miners that did a little bit better on the 4-week time frame. Hut 8 is only down 5%. Cleanspark's down 4%. And that's about it. Everybody else has done worse than Bitcoin at that point. If we go out 12 weeks, now things really change on us this time. Cleanspark outperforming everybody by a large margin here, 108%. Cypher's up 43%. TeraWolf's up 29%. Bitcoin's up 2% from 8 weeks ago. Hut 8 is up 16. Iris is up 31%. Core is up 4%. So those guys have obviously outperformed Bitcoin. And then we got Hive, BitTier, Bitfarms, BitDigital, Riot, and Marathon underperforming Bitcoin for the 8 weeks. 12 weeks, at this point, we have Bitcoin being up 48%. The only one that's done better is Cleanspark being up 68%. TeraWolf is down up 19%, so it's still underperformed here. And everybody else here is negative. You can see how that all has all stacked up. So when we look down here on our table, as far as green weeks, red weeks, and things like that, we're seeing kind of a, well, we had a full red week last week. Prior week was a little bit more green week. And prior to that, we had more of a red week, green week, red week. So we're kind of switching back and forth here a little bit. We had a couple weeks that were in the green here, red week down here. Then we've had more red since the end of the year, going into the January, obviously. And then we've had we've had a lot of green weeks prior to that. Well, Bitcoin miners were going up, Bitcoin was going up, and everything else was looking pretty rosy for us. But that obviously changed after we got into the new year, and things started to look a little bit more dire here on the miners, getting closer to the halving event. Luckily, we are past the halving event, which is good to see. And like I said, the transaction fees are adding quite a bit. So it's not all gloom and doom for the miners, which is a good sign. And it's just a different cycle that we've seen in the past here that I've never seen here, at least the last 2 cycles that I've been a part of, and which is really great to see. But that's about it. So let's get into your guys' Q&A side of things, and we'll call it a day here. So let's do that. If you guys have questions, let me know. We'll do questions, and we'll call it a day here. But probably what I should do before I do that is my sales pitch here. Access to all my spreadsheets is on Patreon. The link for Patreon is in my description of the videos. That's $8 a month right now. There might be some spots open at $5 and $4. And if you pay for a full year, you get 10% discount on top of that. Plus, you get access to our Discord server, which has our private chats in there, private communications. And there's a lot of great people on there with varying different viewpoints on, should you buy and hold? Should you trade them? Should you do options? All that stuff is included in that. And I'm learning a lot from you guys as well in there. So that is it, my sales pitch. Let's get into the Q&A side of things, and then we'll call it a day here. So let me see what we got as far as questions here. Okay. Well, we don't have any questions. We have a comment, so I'll take a comment. Thank you for all your information, Seb. You're very welcome, right? I research this stuff because I'm investing in the miners just like you guys are. So I'm trying to provide as much information that I learn from them as I can to kind of help you guys out as well. Okay. Question. Hello, Sebastian. If BTC will go to 4852K level, what will the impact on hash rate and prices of miners greater than 6 exahash, Cleanspark, Bitfarms, IREN, Wolf, and Mara? Well, if Bitcoin goes down to 4852, which I don't expect it to go down that low, but it might go down to that. But I don't think it will. I think we've pretty much bottomed out here for the time frame. We've kind of battled with 59,000 and we've kind of held above 61,000. So I think that's kind of our line in the sand right now, but we'll see. But if it does happen to go down to 52,000 mark, that's going to be obviously painful for the miners. But depending on where the Bitcoin transaction fees are as well, right? And at that point, if it goes down to 48,000, we might see some decrease in network hash rate because miners at that point with the older machines will not be profitable. So that's kind of what I would expect to happen, but we'll see. Let's see. Question, what's your opinion about IREN low, medium, high share price February 2025? Oh, you're going way out there. I would say IREN right now, let me take a look at my spreadsheet. Where do I have them at? I think they're definitely undervalued from where they should be right now. But I'm looking at my spreadsheet here. Where's IREN? There it is. Right now, going down here, they should be at least like probably 2 to 3x from where they are right now. Right. So that's kind of what I would expect them to be. And it also depends on where Bitcoin goes. If Bitcoin goes up much higher at that point, right, into February 2025, you could say that we could be with IREN probably maybe 5 to 10x higher, right? It just depends on where Bitcoin goes. It's really that simple. So if you expect Bitcoin to be in like 100,000, 150,000, so that would be basically a 2x to 3x roughly on Bitcoin. You could say, yeah, 6 to 8x on IREN potentially. But they also have to install the machines, get the infrastructure set up and built out, and they got to be at basically 20 exahash by that time. And if they do that, they might be going even higher than that. See. Bitfarms and Hut 8 price prediction by the end of the year 2024. Okay, so Hut 8, we'll start with that one. Hut 8 right now is being priced on their HODL, more or less. So let's just say Bitcoin goes up to 100,000. That's roughly another 40,000 from here. That would mean that their price would probably double at least, right? Bitfarms has a much smaller HODL, but they have much ambitious growth plans going into this year where they want to get to 21 exahash by the end of the year. They're currently at about 7 exahash. That's a 3x growth in that. Based on that, if they provide us with that they are fully funded sometime in the future, I think the stock is going to do really well. So I would expect Bitfarms at that point to be probably closer to like $8, $10, maybe $12 or something like that, right? Somewhere around there, just based on what I'm seeing here. Let's see. Do you think having Riot ring the bell on halving day could bring some additional retail FOMO into the mix? Wow, I did not see that they rang the bell. Was it on the NASDAQ? But I don't think it's going to bring in FOMO. FOMO will start coming in when Bitcoin starts going up and the miners are going a lot better, right? When you have people like us telling people that we know that, you're making 100%, 200% gains on these things, and then they start piling in because they want to obviously do the same thing, that's when you start getting FOMO. And at that point, that might be a sign of the top potentially, right? So if you have your dry cleaner asking you about, are you buying Bitcoin miners? That might be a top right there. Let's see here. Does it matter a U.S. miner stock will grow more than non-U.S. miner stock? I think last cycle we saw obviously Marathon, Riot do better than Hut 8, also better than Hive last time. So I think it does matter a little bit because they have access to more capital in the U.S. markets, unfortunately, than you do in like the Canadian market. But Hut 8 is now a U.S. company based. Bitfarms is not. Hive is not. So we'll have to see on that one. See, what will be your sell strategy for miners, mainly depending on BTC price, or seems like everyone is trying to time this? Yeah, I mean, everybody's trying to time where Bitcoin top is going to be at, which is going to be tough. I keep saying it's a different cycle because it is. We have Bitcoin getting to a new all-time high before the halving event. We got the spot Bitcoin ETFs here in the United States. We got spot Bitcoin ETFs happening in Hong Kong. We have banks now potentially, I think it was in Switzerland, that they're going to do maybe a referendum if enough people sign up for it, where they can custody Bitcoin in the bank, right? So there's more adoption that we're seeing day in and day out, which is a good sign, right? Which is something that we want to see. And we just don't know where the top is going to be. So we'll keep a look at like the stock to flow ratio. We'll take a look at the power law ratio on that as well on Bitcoin, see where things are kind of looking to be at. Miners also tend to, what's what I'm looking for? They tend to front run Bitcoin a little bit by about a week or so, right? So we'll keep an eye on it. But basically my exit strategy is, I know what my price targets are for the stocks that I own. If I get close to that, I'll start slowly dollar cost averaging out. And if the stocks go above that, obviously I'll continue to possibly dollar cost average out because I don't know where the top is going to be at. And I don't want to be left holding the bags like I did, excuse me, in 2021. So I've learned my lesson there. I will start taking profits probably sooner than I would normally do, right? Because I learned the lesson in 21, right? I thought Bitcoin was going to 100,000. It didn't. Lessons learned, you live with those and you learn from those and you go forward. Do you think Bitfarms will actually hit their 21 exahash goal by the end of the year? If not, what's your guess where they'll be? So Bitfarms obviously has a pretty audacious goal here, installing approximately, 14 exahash in the next, basically at the end of April here. They're at 7 exahash now. So that's 4 months. So basically in the next 8 months, getting 14 exahash installed is obviously a pretty audacious goal. Now, they have been working on infrastructure and buildings in Paraguay, I believe Argentina as well, and in Canada, getting those things to have more megawatts. And if they can execute on that, I think they can do it. I'm giving them basically a quarter to get to 21 exahash. So if they don't get to 21 exahash by the end of 2021, I would expect them to be at least there by the end of the first quarter of 2024, or 2025, sorry. Right, because things can happen, right? A transformer may not work properly, a power line doesn't get connected or something like that. So I'm giving them a little bit of a benefit of doubt here because it is pretty audacious on that. But I do think they're getting close to it. They might miss it by a little bit, but that's not the end of the world here, right? We'll see. Time will tell. Trust but verify. Let's see. Question, do the changes in transaction fees change your price targets for the miners? Bullish. Yeah, I mean, well, you're going to have to see how the transaction fees continue going forward. Right now, we're seeing pretty nicely elevated transaction fees, right? On average, in the last basically 12 hours or so, it's averaging around 30+% additional. So that's obviously a huge improvement of what we thought. And that will obviously have an impact as far as the revenues, things like that going forward. So yeah, that might obviously have an impact on it as well. Question, do you support holding Bitfarms? All honesty, I own Bitfarms, right? As one of my stocks, Cleanspark, Bitfarms, and IREN right now. So I'm holding it. I've been holding it since 2022. I've been dollar cost averaging into it. I bought it at $5 back then, and I bought it at also like 40 cents when it obviously bottomed out in December of 2022. So I've been buying it for quite a while, and I continue to buy into it. I bought into it last week, the week prior to that. For like the past 5 weeks, I've continued to dollar cost average in, but I've been doing it for over the last 2 years. So, I mean, that's kind of my take on it. I think they're going to do very well. But obviously, you have to do what's right for you. Let's see. What is the latest on Riot's Rockdale facility? Are they coming along with updates? Jason has stated that they are going to be getting new miners in to replace some of the older miners there. And I expect that that's happening right now. Potentially, they also have energized Corsicana facility. They didn't provide as far as what the hash rate was installed there and operating. But I'm guessing we'll get that information when they do report the April production updates in the next 2 weeks or so. Do you see Bitfarms getting to 12 exahash by the end of June? So that's basically 2 months away. It might be tough. Right, they're at 7 now. They need to get 5. I mean, Cleanspark installed basically 6 exahash in a month. Right, they had all the machines plugged in and everything ready to go. They were just waiting on electricity at that point. So it's doable. But we'll have to see on that one. That's kind of their target. We'll see if they can reach their target. If they can reach their target, that means going forward, potentially getting to 21 exahash is possibly more complete. What's the word I'm looking for? Being accomplished, basically, right? They can get that done. Let's see. Reason you didn't own Riot or Mara even when they were at the 52-week lows. And, well, I'll be honest with you guys, that was mainly because of their operations. Marathon has never had sustained good operations as far as network uptime and things like that. Riot, same thing, right? I saw Cleanspark being the new kid, even being the new kid on the block in 2022. I started tracking them in 2021. But they were basically, they said they're going to get to a certain amount of hash rate, and they actually got there and actually surpassed it, right? So I look at those types of things: operations, uptime, efficiencies. Are they growing? All those things. Are they doing the things that they're saying that they're going to do? And that's the reason I didn't get into Riot or Mara at that point. I didn't also like Mara holding Bitcoin in 2022, or continuing to hodl their everything that they mined and diluting shareholders at the same time. I didn't like that. I thought it was probably prudent to start selling some of their Bitcoin at that point. To pay for operations, things like that, instead of diluting shareholders. I didn't like that. That's the reason I didn't do it. Riot is based on their operations here. They had an issue with their 2 of their buildings at Rockdale after a winter storm in, when was it, 2022, went into 2023, obviously, and those 2 buildings didn't come online until like 8 to 10 months afterwards. So that's the reason kind of why on those guys. It's just their operations, their execution, things like that. That's kept me away from them. So far, it has worked out pretty well. I mean, you guys know where Cleanspark is at right now. Let's see. Okay. So if transaction fees hold, does that make CORZ substantially more appealing? Second highest exahash and most BTC mined means they'll benefit a lower sooner than other lower exahash, right? Pay off debt. Yeah, I mean, obviously that does bode well for Cleanspark, and it bodes well for the other miners as well. Yeah, or Cleanspark, sorry, Core. But yeah, I mean, the big thing with them is they just got out of bankruptcy. So there's a lot of people that are hesitant to get into them because of that. And I think people just need to see at least a quarter or 2 of financials to see how they're doing after that. And then we also have the warrants, right? Warrants get executed at $6 something and $8 something. So there's going to be some type of dilution there as well. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of holding investors back a little bit. But they're definitely way undervalued from where they should be right now on this. When do you expect Bitfarms to hire a new CEO? Not good for optics right now. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's nice that they're taking their time, right? We want to make sure we get the right CEO in place. I would rather have them take a little bit more time than rush into it. It's not an easy thing that's going to be, obviously, I mean, it's a huge impact on the company, right? Depending on the CEO you get, he kind of sets his vision going forward. And if you get the wrong vision, it could obviously screw all of us shareholders in here, right? So yeah, like I said, I'm better off with them waiting a little bit longer, finding the right person, than rushing into it. Do you think we will see profitability in the upcoming earnings report beginning in May? Oh yeah, we're going to see a lot of companies being profitable. Marathon, Riot, Cleanspark, Bitfarms, IREN, Cypher, Wolf as well. Mainly because Bitcoin, especially the ones that hodl, right? They get to, the ones that, well, the hodl and the ones that get to take advantage of the FASB rules for Bitcoin valuation, they can really use that quite nicely. But we've also seen Bitcoin going from basically 40-some thousand to like 70-some thousand. And a lot of these guys have been actually growing here in hash rate. So I do expect pretty good numbers here in May. The first 2 miners to 100 by what year? Oh, good question. Let me see. We have basically Marathon, Cleanspark, and Riot all vying to get to like 50 exahash in like 2025 or something like that. Riot has options to buy miners to get to 100 exahash, but they need to build out the infrastructure. Well, so does Cleanspark and Marathon. Based on those things that we have here, as far as track record, I'm going by track record here at least. I would think maybe Cleanspark can possibly get there before Marathon and Riot. And that's only based on their previous history and track record, right? Things can obviously fumble going forward. Marathon could excel going forward. Riot could excel going forward, and Cleanspark could fumble. But based on that history, I would say maybe Cleanspark could possibly do it based on the track record. Let's see. Are you still buying Bitfarms? Yeah, I bought it last week on the dip. I bought it the week prior to that, prior to that. I mean, I've been buying Bitfarms dollar cost averaging into it for the last 2 years and 4 months, something like that right now. And I'll probably continue to do that if it continues to dip it. But I don't know if it's going to dip right now. I think we'll see how this week plays out with the miners, right? I mean, the transaction fees are having a huge impact on the revenue side of things. If those continue, that will obviously have a huge impact on the miners as well. Okay. I watched the live stream you did this weekend. A topic talked about was miners not meeting their growth targets. Do you think Bitfarms or IREN will not reach their targets? Are bullish on the transaction fees? Also bullish. Yeah, I'm bullish on the transaction fees. The transaction fees are obviously really good for the miners. As far as them not reaching their targets, like I said, I'm willing to give them at least a quarter to get to where they're supposed to get to, right? They both have pretty good growth plans. Bitfarms to 21 exahash. What was the question here? Which one was it? IREN is supposed to get to 20 exahash as well by the end of the year. So I'll give it a quarter to get there. So 3 months basically, right? Things can happen. But I would expect them to do that because I don't think they would have purchased miners, done all the things, bought facilities, things else, if they didn't think they could reach that target. So I would say it's probably like 80 to 90% possible that they're going to reach those targets. Let's see here. Thoughts on Soluna? Is that the miner or the coin? Because there's Solana is the coin. Soluna is, I think, the miner. I always get those two mixed up. Potential massive upside. I don't know. I haven't tracked them in over probably a year. I used to track them, but when they got into financial issues in 2022, I think it was, they stopped reporting their monthly updates, and I stopped tracking them at that point. They switched more over to hosting that I remember, and AI side of things. I think going forward, or at least recently, they said AI and other things as well. But they seem like they're doing a lot better, which is nice to see. But I don't know how they're going to do. Let's see here. Any thoughts on the customer report on Friday? I didn't get a chance to take a look at it. I was busy looking at Bitcoin, what that was doing, and the halving event and everything else. Let's see. Why does it matter what companies will achieve hash rate by the end of the year? In essence, after that, they will only have 1 month to mine BTC before BTC's all-time high. Ultimately, HODL should matter. HODL doesn't matter that much. If you look at HODL right now, right, you got companies like MicroStrategy, which have outperformed some of the miners here. You got companies that have huge HODL like Hut8 right now not being valued for their operations. They're basically being valued for their HODL. I think their market cap is around 700 some odd million. Their HODL is worth around 600 million, right? They're being valued on their HODL basically on that, but not on operations. But when you see other companies like Marathon, Cleanspark, Riot, that have pretty huge growth plans and pretty good HODLs as well, you can see that their HODL is being valued at around like 20% only. And the other side of things is the operations, their growth. That's contributing a lot more to the stock prices there. So that's kind of what I would say on that. Right, because you also have the spot Bitcoin ETFs you can get into now. HODL is not as important of a metric, I think, as it was in the past, where investors didn't have the capabilities to invest in Bitcoin easily, other than, getting it through Coinbase or other exchanges like that, and then you had to custody your own coins in your own hardware wallets. It was a lot more difficult. Now you got the spot Bitcoin ETFs; it's a lot easier. So I think there's a little bit less importance on the HODL side of things, and we've also seen companies that HODL through the bear market, which makes absolutely no sense. HODL through the bull market, which they should be selling it, using it to grow in the bear markets, but they weren't. So I don't think that's as important as it used to be. Let's see. Let's see. Will you think there will be a sell-off with the miners in September? That month market tends to go down. I mean, if the market goes down, the miners are going to go down as too, right? But usually when what we see is with Bitcoin at least is like the fall and winter times are usually like some of the best months for Bitcoin going up like crazy. So we'll see on that one. It'll be interesting. Let's see. Question, do you have any thoughts on Canon? It closed at 75 cents and seems like it's a bargain basement price. Good buy. I looked at Canon a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago. If you look at how the miners performed over the last 2023, right? In 2023, the miners did excellent, right? They were up nicely, everything else. Canon, not so much, right? I don't think there's that much love in Canon anymore. It's not performing the same way as Bitcoin is as a proxy. For that reason, I would stay away from it. I just haven't seen anything on that one. And there might be reasons why it's at 75 cents right now. Any thoughts on Cypher? I like Cypher. They are obviously in a much better position now that Bitfury doesn't own 75% of the shares. They're down to like 40%, so that's good. They also have pretty good growth going forward, but some of it is not until, or most of it is not until 2025. They do have options to buy more miners in 2024 if they can build out the infrastructure, which I think is their Black Pearl site in Texas, right? If they can do that, that'd be great. But most of the growth is not until 2025, unfortunately. So that's kind of my thoughts on that one. Let's see. What's your opinion about Mara and Riot only hitting diminishing returns? Example, 0.618 level of former 2021 all-time highs. I'll watch out for those levels. I don't really watch, or I don't do chart analysis on the miners, things like that. You also have to take into consideration how much growth they have had over the last basically 3 years, right? Where were they in exahash then compared to where they are now? And what's the percentage of network hash rate compared to then and what that is now? So also, what's the revenue going to be like compared to then and what it is now? So I still think that they can possibly reach their all-time highs prior to in 2021 and surpass those even, depending on where Bitcoin goes, right? So you gotta have to look into a lot of things there. Let's see. Let's see. Price target for Riot and Mara. Mara, I think, is going to definitely go above $70, $60, depending if they can fix their operations and how well they grow. Same thing for Riot. Riot has to obviously do much better on their operations, on their uptime and everything. If they can fix those issues, they will do much better. Which miners get to use the new FASB rules? Why do some get to use it and others don't? Okay, depending on where they're reporting from. So companies that are based in Canada or Australia or other parts, they use a different standard for accounting rules. Here in the United States, they use, I think it's the FASB rules. It might be trying to think. I think it is the FASB. I think it is. I'm not an accountant here, but the way I understand it is companies that have HODL in the United States, they can use the new FASB rules to reevaluate their Bitcoin value based on the actual value at the end of the quarter instead of being like the lowest number that they would have to use for Bitcoin price at that quarter, right? So it's a much better valuation on it, which obviously if they had a value of, let's just say 300 million in the beginning of the quarter, at the end of the quarter, they had it valued at 500 million, right? That's a huge increase in that value there that should be obviously reported on the balance sheet as well. So that also helps the miners that way, that they're growing their revenues based on having a HODL here. And I think one thing might be advantageous to be in the United States is because of that, right? If you have a HODL. If you don't have a HODL, it doesn't really matter. But companies like Bitfarms, Hive, Hive has a HODL, obviously. Bitfarms does have a HODL as well. Those guys would probably benefit from being located in the United States, or at least headquartered in the United States, even though they operate in Canada, Paraguay, Argentina for Bitfarms, places like that. Let's see here. How different are infrastructure requirements for Bitcoin mining ASICs versus AI model training applications? Okay, that's not an easy question to answer. It depends on your customer. Ideally what you want, if you want a customer for AI model training, and that customer also wants then to have, tier 3, tier 4 data center uptime, you're looking at a much higher cost for infrastructure at that point. If you're looking at a customer that doesn't really care if the uptime isn't 99.99999%, if it's 98% or something like that, they're willing to pay less for that. If you can get a customer for that, that's great. And then obviously your costs for infrastructure at that point are much lower. Because once you start including in redundancies for electricity, for internet, for cooling, all those things, it gets to be a much more expensive endeavor for people looking to get into AI, for language models and things like that. But I think with language models, you really just need to compute all that information, right? To build out the models for that, and you're set. So there's not really any need for customer service information or customer information, credit cards, things like that. You're not really dealing with all that information. You're just trying to process the data as best you can, get the information or get the language models set up. Then you can move them over to Amazon or other places, for that side of thing. So it's not that easy. It just depends on the customer. Let's see. Which mining pool is Iris? I don't know. It might be in their 10K or 10Q reports. They might provide that, but I just don't know. Let's see. I'm catching up here to you guys' questions here. BITQ or WGMI. So those are the Bitcoin miners ETFs. I own both of them in my 401k plan. So I think Bitcoin BITQ has been doing a little bit better recently than WGMI, whereas WGMI was doing a little bit better before. But we'll see. If Bitcoin goes up, miners go up, they'll both do really well. Is it possible that you get into Hive again this year at some point? Yes, their growth plans are not that great, but also it is most undervalued. I mean, it's most undervalued because of their lack of growth plans, right? So that's kind of the reason why. I'm looking. I'll just say this: I'm looking for miners that are growing tremendously here, right? So you're looking at the miners that we have that are growing tremendously are Marathon, Riot, Cleanspark, Bitfarms, IREN, TeraWolf, Cypher, and you got also maybe like BitDeer in there as well, in their Bitcoin mining hash rate this year. So those are the ones I'm looking at, and then I'm looking at which ones have the most potential going forward, operational excellence, things like that. Right, Hive. I owned Hive from 2017 through 2023. Last year I sold it because I just didn't see the growth there. Okay, thanks. Canon announced an ATM this week, and that led to, see, there you go. All right, stock isn't performing that well. It's not as great of a Bitcoin proxy as it maybe was in the past, but I'm not seeing that with, I'm trying to think if there's another one that's also doing icing machines. I think Canon might be the main one here. But yeah, I just looked at the charts. If you compare Bitcoin to Canon over the last year, 2 years, I mean, you'll see Bitcoin price is going up. Their chart is going down. That's a red flag for me right there. Okay, IREN is and pool confirmed by Mike Alfred. Okay, thank you for that. Let's see here. Does Riot's bad news and good news from a few days ago cancel itself out? Okay, so you're talking about the increase in shares from 340 million to 680 million, I believe, right? And then I'm obviously energizing Corsicana facility. I don't know if it cancels it out. The miners, if they want to grow, they're going to have to dilute. We know that. They should have probably, I think they did a increase in shares last year as well. I think they should have just bit the bullet back then and increased them to 600, whatever it is, 680 million or 700 million, whatever they would have ended up with. But they should have done that back then instead of 1 year after a year increasing the number of shares that they can use. But yeah, I mean, it's not like they're going to use it right now. I think they have, was it a 1 billion ATM that they're using right now? They have a pretty good sizable HODL as well. I think this is just plans for going forward. So going past probably into 2028, right? And after probably in a couple of years, they'll probably start diluting some more of that. But I think right now they're pretty much set for what they need. Let's see. Question, what's your dad's selling price for CORZ? Thanks. Oh, geez. If I ask him, he says $100. But we know that's not going to happen, maybe at least not yet. But I think he's trying to get at least a double to 3x on it, potentially, if not more, maybe a 5x on it. I think he'll be happy at that point. He's held on to it for, now 2 years before the bankruptcy. He was buying into it. I told him, I didn't like the fact that they were losing money on hosting, and then their selling business as well was going down. I just didn't like that part of the business, and I thought it was possibly going to bring him down, and it did bring him down. But that's why I never got into him. He did, because he thought, based on them being the biggest miner at that point, right, they were mining the most, that they have the most upside potential. And I think he learned from that lesson. But he's continued to dollar cost average down into them. But yeah, I think he's waiting maybe to get at least maybe a 2 to 5x out of them, and then he'll sell at that point. Okay, I think we've pretty much cut up to all your guys' questions here. I don't see anything else popping up. So tomorrow, obviously, we'll see what happens. It should be interesting with the miners. I don't know what they're exactly going to do, but based on what I'm seeing here as far as the transaction fees and everything else, it's not as bad as everybody thought the halving was going to be on the miners. They're not going to be cutting revenue 50%. It might be cut in revenue by 40 or not 50%. It might be like 25, 30% or something like that, or even less than that, 15%, depending on what transaction fees are based on. But that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. We'll see how that plays out. Either way, I'm still bullish on the miners long term, right? We still have at least 12 to 18 months after the halving event where things could get interesting, could see Bitcoin going to a new all-time high and much higher from where it's at right now. We have a lot of things going forward for us. We have the spot Bitcoin ETFs. We have the spot Bitcoin ETFs in Hong Kong. We have banks getting into Bitcoin as well. So it's just a lot of adoption happening, which is all great news here. And it's just going to be, I think, a wonderful ride in the next 12 to 18 months. It's been a rough ride for the past 2 years with things going down and up and down and up. But if you were able to stomach it, which we have to stomach it a little bit with the Bitcoin miners because they're so volatile, right? Bitcoin goes up 10%. These guys could go up 50%. Bitcoin goes down 10%. These guys can go down 50%. So you got to kind of stomach it and have a much longer, I think, lens on things in this perspective. Okay. But that is it. Thank you so much for coming in to watch this. I don't see anything else here as far as my questions are concerned. So I'll call it a day. And then we'll see what happens this week. And if there's any updates and things like that, maybe we'll get into some other metrics as well on top of that. So thank you so much for coming in. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. It's exciting. We're past the halving event. So good times ahead of us, I think. All right. I'll see you guys in the next one.